It's been a while, guys, but we are back with another competitive edge here for League of Legends. Always fantastic to do these, and thanks to Esports Bet, of course, for sponsoring this. We will be using the Esports Bet website to make some predictions for this week of LCS and LEC. As usual, guys, we have a very special offer for you. If you use our referral code, which you can find down below on this video, you can get 100% risk-free bet up to $100 in USDT. So if it's your first time on the site and you've used our code, you can go ahead and place a bet up to $100 USDT. If you lose, just go ahead and message the mods on the Discord with your information, and they'll credit it back to your account. So it's a good way to start playing. And also, if you want to take some good odds, you know, might win quite a bit of money, in fact, and you have a very low downside. So it can be pretty fun in order to get yourself started here on esportsbet.io. As always, you can also play for free with DJT, their proprietary currency, which can then also be translated into cryptocurrency. And you can find all of that information on esportsbet.io.
You can even potentially watch matches like the LCS through the client, through the website embedded, and you can even earn DJT, which you can then also use for all this. So they've got a million different offers. Check out the website, basically.
Yeah. And also, guys, starting next week, we here at Last Free Nation are going to be able to select a match of the week. And if you have signed up, this is very fun, guys. If you have signed up with our referral code and you place a wager on that match and you win, you will get a 10% bonus on your winnings. So that's going to be pretty sick as well. So be sure to stay tuned. You'll hear more about that on our shows and on Competitive Edge for LFN's match of the week. All right, so we have quite a few new rosters. And again, you know, I like to be a little bit conservative early in the season because we haven't seen these teams in a while. And also there have been so many roster changes, particularly in the LCS, that it can be hard to get a read on certain teams this early. That said, I picked out 5 matches across LCS and LEC that I think are perhaps a little bit squirrely, given the current rosters, and may be able to net you some good returns. So LCS.
By the way, if you do want to go crazy though, if you want to sweat, this is actually also the best time because it's best of ones to do like big underdogs. If you wanted to start the split out and hope some team that no one's ever watched before just is way better. This is also when you're going to get the odds that might even pay off.
Yeah, exactly. No, totally agree with you on that front as well. And so the first match that we've got to talk about is NRG. Remember, this is the old CLG roster, but the difference is they have Ignar now, so arguably an upgraded the support position. And I think this is a relatively safe pick this early in the season. I mean, last year I got a bunch right on CLG because I kept predicting them in upsets with really, really good odds. So we got some very nice returns there. And they're going up against Immortals. And remember, Immortals has been the roster that has changed pretty significantly, right? So they've kept Kenvi and Tactical, but they have Bolulu in the mid lane, Solo in the top lane, and Treats as their support player currently. So pretty big shift in style as well for Immortals, which is why I think it's kind of ridiculous that we're getting 1.5 odds on energy, especially considering how well CLG did last split relative to what you would consider kind of the star power of their roster. They were always a team that was more than the sum of their parts.
Yes.
And I think for me, the problem here is like you get these really good odds on energy, almost 1.5, for what I would consider a very heavy favorite, especially considering that Immortals is swapping out a bunch of their players. And the question becomes, who's going to carry on this team? Because the previous iteration of the roster was Revenge a lot of the time as their primary carry. They're switching to really like a weak side kind of tank player in Solo. Tactical was bad. I mean, just bad, you know, last split a lot of the time. And they had some turbulence at the mid lane position. So for me, I find it difficult to believe that this team is going to have enough built-in synergy and a concept of how they want to play as a team compared to a CLG roster that's basically running it back and is arguably upgraded with Ignar. What are your takes?
Yeah, the thing is, I don't actually like despise all the players on the Immortals team. Like I've always thought Solo's, but like he should have always probably been in
Underrated for
LCS.
sure.
He's not a bad player. Yeah, I also actually think Treats is pretty solid when he was in
Yep.
Europe. I assume on this team the idea is he's probably the captain and be the shot caller and stuff. But that takes time to build up. I don't expect right out the gate with it. Because that's the thing, Monty. Like you're saying, there's no pre-existing synergies here. Like they're just throwing a bunch of players. They're not even players like the Bololulu guys from Turkey via Wave Sweden, essentially. So it's like, who knows how this roster is going to be? If they're going to be good, it'll be in a few weeks. Whereas, as you say, the CLG/NRG roster is a known quantity with, in theory, a quality veteran at the support position. Igna has always been good in LCS. And then also, you just look at their team in general. It's like you said, the joke about CLG is they really do make me believe that occult concept that you have to be very careful what names and sort of like correspondences, as they say, you invoke. Because when they called that team Counter Logic Gaming, it's not just a meme. The whole history of the org became Counter Logic. Like, for example, what are the odds that they'd actually get fairly consistent lineups that overperform in the era when they don't hire any imports and they have no massive names? Meanwhile, when they had, double lift, sometimes they had some of their worst splits. When they had Afro Boost still, sometimes it wasn't always going that well. So the NRG squad, I actually expect they're probably going to be like old CLG if you look at the rosters with other teams downgrading often. I think they're going to be like a playoff team that'll be like fourth or fifth. So yeah, I think they're a solid pick.
Yeah, so especially this early in the season, like obviously a lot of these, there's going to be turbulence in the standings. I just find it very difficult to believe that this isn't a good odds match for NRG. So let's go ahead, take them at almost 1.5 here. I'm going to put 500 USDT on this match. Again, we are going to be a little bit conservative this early in the split just because we don't know exactly how everything is going to shake out. Moving on to another LCS match. This one also seems super interesting to me because, again, I think it's probably pretty good value on Golden Guardians because, again, Golden Guardians is a roster that we just saw at MSI. They arguably overperformed in many ways on their MSI run and like held up pretty well internationally, especially players like Huhi, and we knew River and Gory were going to do well. Gory was the best mid in the LCS last split. River was arguably the best jungler in the LCS last split. And the problem was Licorice, but Licorice towards the playoffs and even at MSI way outperformed what he did in the regular season. So the question is this a new kind of standard of form again for Licorice? Because if the answer is yes, then we're dealing with an Evil Geniuses squad that lost kind of,
it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess, right? Like Jojo PN was underperforming. They've added, they've added Unforgiven, which I think is potentially quite good for them. That was a good pickup.
Monty, here's the thing. This is how you know this guy's playing his career on Nightmare mode. They paired him with Isla. Now, I know all the stories still are like, you don't know behind the scenes, everyone wants Isla. He's super sick. If this was like one of those, sell the stock, like sell now. Like, I haven't seen it, mate. I haven't seen it. So that's going to be a totally fresh bot lane. I don't know about that, mate. I mean, it's essentially the Jojo Peon show, right? And I even notice he did the right thing changing name. Your old mate Greg is waiting in the wings to take the jungle spot. Like, what is this? How's he always around? He just never dies. He never dies. He's still here again.
But it's also that Inspired was really one of the, because Inspired has a very particular style of jungling, right? Like he's a carry jungler. Yep. He's an MVP candidate. You put the resources in Inspired. With Revenge coming onto this roster, you have to remember that EG has been playing with weak side top laners for a real long time now, whether it was Someday or, Impact, right? And so now they're switching to what is effectively a carry top laner, switching away from a carry jungler, and you are also bringing in a new bot lane. I think that this team can be good, right? I actually think that it's possible if Jojo PN looks better. I think Jojo PN also underperformed relative to last year so far in 2023, but this fundamentally shifts the way that EG is going to play the game to such a degree, and Ayla is not a good player, just straight up. Like, there's a huge downgrade from Vulcan, and you're putting together a new bot lane. Meanwhile, again, Golden Guardians coming off of what we would consider a pretty decent international performance compared to the players that they have signed to this team. And there's no real reason.
Your two best players are jungle mid, mate. You're going to do work in the Western regions. Absolutely.
So, I mean, Golden Guardians arguably did overperform because other teams underperformed in LCS in spring. But I still think that they have a shot at being top 3, right? I think that they could easily run it back into the finals.
Realistically, EG should be one of the worst teams. If you look at the lineups in the league, they're one of the bottom 2 or 3 teams. Look at all the different lineups, mate. Who's worse than them?
I would say potentially Immortals, potentially Liquid, depending, and TSM.
I guess Liquid one's debatable. We'll see on that
one. So, I mean, Dignitas, they got rich, I guess. That's a little weird. Like, that one could be super weird again, but we'll see.
It's like you say, though, the rosters are mega funky. Like, a lot of these teams that were, like, bad last split had, like, players that should have been better. So, like, I think there's going to be some bounce backs.
Yeah. And regardless, we're looking at odds that are 1.5 for what I would consider a pretty heavy favorite in this matchup. I feel really good about this match in particular. These are even better odds than NRG versus IMT. So
I'm actually amazed that it's so high when you consider Golden Guardians even looked good at MSI at times.
Right? Yeah. That's why I picked this one. I thought it was a little weird. So we'll go a little bit heavier, 750 USDT into Golden Guardians. I feel like that's pretty decent. Looking forward to some of these matches. We're going to close out with one final LCS matchup, which again, I find to be pretty shocking, which is that FlyQuest is at 1.6 compared to 2.134 for Golden Guardians. Now,
I'll tell you what this is right now. This is just recency bias. This is just people like, well, Golden Guardians is really good. And FlyQuest, they were terrible in the playoffs. It's like, yes, but remember one of the reasons why? The support player, we just talked about him, he was a bomb. Well, you know what? They've already gone and got the best NA support player, Vulcan, who's never been bad. How can they, if this is just what the doctor ordered, surely this is just going to make that bot lane smurf, mate. He's also the sort of player that you want if you're a hard carry ADC.
Yeah, and they haven't changed the fundamental identity of this team and the way they wanted to play. Remember that when we saw this team doing really well, a lot of it was playing through Prince. Well, they upgraded his lane partner, not just like a little bit, but pretty fucking
as much as you could, considering they didn't have any import slots left. Yeah, it's the best you could hope for.
Like, this is a massive upgrade, and it's also, part of their issue was having some, macro issues sometimes in the early game or falling behind. Well, Vulcan's going to be a player who's a veteran who knows where to be on the map if the support needs to roam. And you could say, okay, well, Vikla kind of wasn't doing well. Well, Vikla historically, especially when you go back to his time on KT in Korea, was quite a good Ahri player. Well, Ahri's back in the meta right now. He should be able to play Annie. Like, surely he can play some of these kind of meta setup champions in the mid lane relatively well, which again will provide more action for Prince. And we have to look at the meta. What is this meta? Well, we're back to Jinx, Zeri, reset hyper carries, guys. We've seen his Lucian as well, Prince. Like, this is a meta that is designed for some of these big AD carry players to win. That's why we think, Berserker and Prince and these kind of players on these teams are going to do really well right out of the gate. So considering that, we did see FlyQuest fade down the stretch, I think a lot of that was probably frustration in the team with their support position and the fact that they were falling behind in these early games, and it felt like they were constantly having to team fight their way from a deficit. But this fixes so many of their problems without really fundamentally changing the structure of the team. So even though we were just singing Golden Guardians praises, Golden Guardians can be good, but they do not have the star power of this FlyQuest roster.
Yes.
And so I think getting Fly at 1.6 odds right now for a favorite offers some potentially very good value. But I do think this is closer than the last one.
To me, for the last 3 or 4 seasons, meta dependent, obviously. Mid lane, back in the day, we used to say mid lane and jungle are sort of shared positions. You shouldn't judge them separately. In the modern day with the roaming supports, you also have to look at support as well. So if your support is having troubles, it's also going to mean the mid laner doesn't have as many opportunities. He's not getting unlocked. He's not getting someone roaming up, etc. So if this works out, I agree with you. This essentially the hope is this makes FlyQuest the true contender to Cloud9, and we get the banger final competing for the top spot that we almost had, but then we just got blue balls right at the end.
Yeah, and I really want to emphasize that Winsome and Ayla were giant weights for FlyQuest last split, giant weights. They were quite bad and really limited in terms of their champion pools, not mechanically very proficient in Winsome's case. So I really think Vulcan adding to this roster is going to be a huge boon for them.
It's the old loco joke. They had the Rock Lee training weights on. Well, obviously, when he takes them off, Prince, he's going to be insane now, isn't he? He's going to be unleashed.
I think people are going to be really surprised by this iteration of FlyQuest because for me, they're the favorites to win LCS with this roster, and it's not really very
And
close.
by the way, as someone who watched him in LCK, look, I knew Vikla could be up and down, but I was actually shocked how bad he was towards the end of the split. I don't expect that to continue. I think he has to bounce back now. He's had some time in NA. Hopefully, he's got his game together. I bet he's been grinding. He's Korean.
Yeah, I imagine he went back to Korea during the break too, and kind of got a rest, and got some time in at home, got some time on the Korean ladder. Hopefully that's true. I don't know that
as
for
you
sure.
Say, the odds
but
are
a lot of players.
1.6 for a team that we actually expect to be a favorite in the league is very good.
Yeah, so even though they're going up against Golden Guardians, now obviously it's a best of one, and Golden Guardians is one of the better teams in the league. So maybe we don't go quite as hard on this one. I'll put 500 on FlyQuest here. Gives a return of 800 if it goes through. Feels fair. Transitioning over to LEC, we've got some interesting matches coming up. There have been some roster moves that we've seen so far. And Team Heritics,
particularly Heretics.
Yeah, Heritics is one of those teams because they brought in VTO, former LEC MVP, and they kept Evie, very interestingly. I think that might surprise some people who know some of these teams. They got rid of Jack Spectra and Ruby, and they now have Flakkid, who was kind of an okay ADC on G2.
Should have been an LEC. Should have been.
Yeah. Probably deserves to be an LEC. Yeah. But a pretty big upgrade as Ruby goes to TSM. For reasons that God only knows, and they did not replace Evie in the top lane.
Just to make me happy, I guess. Reckless has quit being ADC completely, left the game. Ruby goes to TSM. Everything's working out for me. Here's the thing about this move, Monty. The reason why I really believe in this move is I watched thier for those 3 splits where he was really good and he was MVP quality for a couple of them. And all I heard behind the scenes is he's a person who needs setup, he needs comfort, he needs someone to help him and cover for him from the jungle, etc. You couldn't ask for something better than this. He's got Jankos now. Jankos has played with it. Think about it. Jankos has been the MVP when he's played with a bunch of mid laners, Perks, Caps. Like, you couldn't ask for a better player to sort of see, is there still greatness in thier, basically? So I think Heretics is going to be a better team in general. Yeah. At least going to be fun. It's why the odds are so close for this matchup.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that when we have Peter Dunn, he knows how to use players based on their strengths, and VTO is just a player that can be used very effectively on his strengths. And I do believe, and you and I might have different opinions on who's going to win this game, Thorin, but as much as I think that Heretics will probably get better as the split goes on, I still have question marks about Evie in the top side. And for me, when we look at SK Gaming, they're coming off of a pretty decent, a kind of surprisingly good performance in spring. And we've kind of seen Exakick do really well from the AD carry role for this roster, and they seem to have very good synergy. So for me, given that the changes in the Heretics roster and the fact that we get SK at 1.7 feels pretty good for me for SK because they're not losing any of that synergy. And they
believe they are the favorite. That's a very high odds to get.
Yes,
I think this is a pick-em match. You can take either side on this one.
I think it's relatively even, but I just believe, having seen VTO transition teams already away from Misfits, it's going to take some time in order to get the team comfortable in terms of playing pretty directly through him. But I think by the end of the summer, by the end of the round robin, we may see some really good synergy between Jankos and VTO, and that's where this team is going to win. I just don't know if it's going to happen immediately. And this is just another one of those situations where if I can get a team that was performing well in SK, and remember, we're still, again, in that AD carry meta, playing through Exakick in the bot lane can be a very good winning strategy for SK Gaming. And so that gives me confidence. That gives me confidence in SK, and especially when you're replacing that carry with a player like Flakkid, who was really a secondary carry on his previous LEC roster. I'm not sure if they're just quite as cut out for this meta, especially if VTO is playing more setup champions or has to play Annie or something like that in the mid lane, right? So for me, I take SK here. Do you disagree?
Here's the thing. I might take the flyer on Heretics, but then again, I'm a little bit down on SK. I want to see more from them. I think they sort of peaked in winter. For me, they didn't make any changes. Like I say, I think this is a pick'em.
Well, I would take a flyer on Heretics if the odds were better. 1.9 isn't enough. I'm not super confident in this one, guys, but the odds are pretty good for SK.
I mean, it's a unseen team. We have no idea how they're going to play.
Yeah, we're gonna.
So hard to bet on teams like that.
We're gonna.
By the way,
I'm gonna go 250
for this
on
last one. For this last one as well, the G2 BDS one, the one you're going to do next. I just want to make a statement at the outset here.
Okay.
Remember, BDS was one game from winning LEC.
Exactly.
BDS was the team that was like going through the upper bracket. They were awesome. G2 didn't even make the finals. Yes, G2 won a lower bracket match against Mad Lions at MSI. This is where y'all have got to stop telling me I'm the hater. By all your metrics fans out there, you love BDS. How could they possibly be 2.595 odds? That's enormous. It's the most odds of any team who's an underdog on this actual betting slip that Monty's got of 5 teams here. Even Immortals has got better odds against NRG than BDS. Essentially is being treated like they are the Western team against like T1 or something. It's ridiculous. Like, y'all don't believe in them. I don't either, by the way, but y'all don't believe in them at all. What?
So, I mean, I picked this one because I just thought it was fucking absurd. Right?
Mad, isn't it? Yeah.
Like, even if you believe that G2 is the favorite in this matchup,
this is a perfect flyer to take no clinch into the rosters.
BDS had an excellent performance in spring. Now we're going to be in summer. Like you say, they were a game away from taking the LEC title, and you're telling me that they are almost 2.6 underdogs in a best of 1 to G2.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And by the way, in a meta,
it just means everyone put all the money on G2, by the way. That just means all the fans put it on G2.
Yeah, exactly. In a meta where Crowny can still hard carry the fuck out of this team, and he was the best AD carry in the league in spring. And there's no reason, I mean, his champion pool suits this just fine. It's not like he has a major flaw in terms of the AD carry champion pool. So yeah, my mind was fucking blown by these odds.
Especially as the opener. It's just, I mean, remember the last time we saw BDS, they were in the finals. Like, I think it's a great underdog to take, mate. The odds are just too crazy. You don't even have to be right that many times.
Yeah, and I don't think that, I mean, I think you could make a somewhat compelling argument that, you know, G2 are the favorite here. But even if you were to believe that, they're not 1.4 to 2.6 favorites.
Oh,
right?
This match should be more like the SK team Heretics odds.
Yes.
If it was like that, then fair enough. Then you can take the favorite, no problem. On this one, it's just the odds just price you in for the underdog.
Yeah, like I said,
and by the way, it seemed like a well-coached team. You know, they were also awesome in the best of ones last split. Like, yeah, I think everything points to taking the flyer here. Essentially, shout out G2 fans, just pumping those juicy odds up for us.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go crazy, but because of the odds, you know, we do 250 USDT here. That's 648 back. So I'll take more than double on a team that was 1 game away from winning LEC, and in a meta that still should prioritize their ability to play through crown shot. So yeah, I mean, I just looked at that one. I was like, God damn. Unfortunately, guys.
Also, by the way, as an aside, there's also a universe where, just like they did all the other times, inexplicably in draft again, they just let Adam take one of his only champions he can pick and then just win a matchup that no one understands because no one ever plays Olaf into this and Darius into that. And that you also just get occasionally just free wins given in draft by these teams in the LEC.
Yeah, and BDS, I mean, certainly both of these teams have very unique styles that are unlike most of the other teams in the world. You know, obviously G2 spent a lot of time at MSI and in the playoffs playing through Yike and kind of these carry junglers, which is unusual. And as I pointed out at MSI, he was actually the only player in the entire world in the major regions to play Belveth in the first half of this year.
He kept doing it.
And he kept doing it 6 games or something like that heading into MSI. So certainly, you know, they can catch teams off guard, but also the LEC teams are going to be more aware of their bullshit than international teams are and have more practice in scrims against it as well. Same thing with Adam, right? Obviously, like, Adam's a very unique player when it comes to the way that his team plays through him. So they're going to be comfortable in their own styles, but this is certainly not a 2.6 to 1.4 odds matchup. Now, the reason why we didn't do any LCK matches this week, guys, is that LCK, there's a bunch of one-sided games this week, and it's next week that we have T1 versus KT, which is the telecom war, which I might be picking as our match of the week there because I really believe in KT right now. I really fucking do. I think Keen's the best top laner in LCK.
Just know it's T1. Those T1 fans are going to pump those KT odds up for us and make it nice and juicy, of course. Every time.
Yeah, and T1's not looking super solid right now. So I think that there's a good shot that KT wins that.
By the way, you know, that's actually the maddest thing I've enjoyed about actually learning like the betting experience and just looking at odds is I used to get mad before all the stands who refused to accept teams are slightly overrated. But now I get to like use TSM and T1 stands and G2 stands against themselves. Like they make the odds go down on their team, make the underdog go up, and then I just take the cheeky KT angle.
That's right. That's right. Can be fun. I wish I had gotten in on the Gen G versus T1 because the T1 odds are always just so bonkers.
Oh, it's always ridiculous.
And also, guys, as we said before,
it must be S. He's the one who's betting it all every single time, I think.
As we said before, we don't fuck with LPL odds here because that league's way too volatile.
No,
we don't fuck with LPL.
In the early part of the regular season, no way.
Playoffs will fuck with LPL. Playoffs will fuck with LPL, but regular season LPL is just it's so unpredictable. So. Yeah,
and that's a best of 3 league, guys. But with the LPL, you need a best of 5. I don't trust best of 3s, mate. No way.
All right. So thanks, guys, for watching Competitive Edge. Be sure to subscribe here to the Esports Bet channel. This is where Face Check is as well, which you guys like for discussions of the LCS with Digon, Dom, and LS. And we've got Competitive Edge for both CSGO and League of Legends here. CSGO obviously going to take a little bit of a break during the player break because there just aren't going to be games, or tier 1 games at the very least. But League of Legends will be here for the split. Subscribe and get more Competitive Edge and Face Check for yourself. Thanks a lot.